It's time for a Humans in Tune conversation with Darren on 93.9 Mike FM.
93.9 Mike FM is Darren Bergfeld with you. Time for a 93.9 Mike FM Humans in Tune segment. My guest today, jazz musician and Grammy Award winner, Dr. Chip McNeill, who's coming in town for the Phi Mu Alpha Jazz Festival and for a concert at Scout Hall as part of the Underground Jazz Series. Coming in next weekend. Coming in to you, though, right now. Thank you. Dr. Chip, welcome.
Thank you, Darren. It's my pleasure to be here, and I appreciate everybody associated with the Phi Mu and Clark Terry Jazz Festival for having me in, and the university, Felipe, and yourself for having me on the radio here on 93.9 and River Radio, and I look forward to chatting with you about the concert, and I'm looking forward to getting to work with the students and perform for everybody and share some music.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the cool thing about the Phi Mu Alpha Jazz Festival is it's bringing all these local high school students in, not just for, the experience of performing at the festival and having those clinicians talk to them and so forth, but also getting to see top tier jazz musicians like yourself. And that's been a tradition with the music festival, bringing these guests in. And of course, I'm sure you'll be spending some time, with those students, doing some sectionals and guest directing and so forth as well, right?
Yes, I certainly will.
Yeah,
I do a lot of, working with similar things around here and regionally and in the state of Illinois. I do a lot of what we call adjudications, and we have district jazz festivals, and I'm sure they have them in Missouri as well. I know they do. I've actually done the Missouri All-State Jazz Band a couple of different times through the years.
Nice.
I started the jazz program here at the University of Illinois about 24 years ago, the degree programs.
Nice.
And I remember within the first 5 years or so, I was invited down to do the All-State Missouri Jazz Band, and I've gotten to work through the years with many talented students from Missouri, a lot of people from St. Louis, worked with several bands there through the years, and I still go down there and play quite a bit. And I'm still traveling a lot and doing a lot of different residencies and things. But I really look forward to working with the students, not only one-on-one, but just in group settings and talking about jazz and talking about possible careers in this business. It's a lot of fun. I always tell the students they've picked the hardest thing there is to do, but also the greatest thing there is to do if they want to pursue jazz and music as a career. If they're just passionate about it and they love it, go for it.
Yep. I think that's a valid point. Really anything that you want to pour yourself into and be passionate about, it's a tough road, but when you get there, it is a lot of fun. I'm a trombone player by trade. I'll even say that in public. So, I kind of came up, and I mentioned, I was in Phi Mu Alpha when we started the jazz festival there at SEMO, and as a trombone guy, jazz has given me a lot of opportunities to play alongside some of my icons and have a lot of fun along that road too. And it's cool to be able to tell those students, you can do it, and you can do it, and you can do it. And jazz offers that palette of so many different variations. I mean, that's the beauty of jazz, right, is the multicolor that you get with the music. And so, whether they're more of a funk guy or, more of a South American jazz type of person, whatever they lean into, that'll provide those opportunities through their life. And I know it has for you as well.
Oh, yes. Jazz has afforded me so many opportunities my whole life to travel the world, meet interesting people all over the place, not only musicians, but other artists and other forms of art, and just interesting people. And I would highly, highly recommend any person that wants to follow any kind of aesthetic and art aesthetic. If you're passionate about it and you like doing it, you'll love it. I mean, because jazz has really afforded me that. And without the music, I probably wouldn't have done as much as I've done and traveled most of the world at this point in my lifetime. And those are memories and experiences you can never trade.
Yes.
Wonderful. And I want to make sure that all the students know that, there's work to be done, to get yourself, to put yourself in a position. But that's true with anything that you're good at. And so there's no more than anything else. It's just if you believe in yourself, keep going. New vistas open up all the time, too. That's the other thing. Traveling through music and through jazz with me has allowed me to go into many aspects of writing music, production of music, other things, and film music. So that's really been wonderful as a part of my career, and without, pursuing it, that would never have happened.
My son is in 8th grade. He started trombone last year, despite my pleadings to have something in a different octave. But you know what you got to do. But I hope that
that's right. I love trombone players.
Yeah, hey, we're here for the jokes. And as you mentioned, that has kind of rounded your experience into learning more about studio and production and what it takes in the studio as a musician. Expectations and so forth too. So. That's led you to the studio. As I mentioned, you are a Grammy-winning saxophonist. Let's talk a little bit about your growth as a jazz musician and kind of how you came into being able to play with some of the monsters and legends that you have over your career.
Well, I really come from pretty humble beginnings. I mean, my father was a saxophonist. He was kind of a child prodigy during the Depression years back in the 30s. And his dad, who was a trombone player, his father, my grandfather, one of my grandfathers, and his dad took him around to state fairs and things, and he was playing when he was 4 or 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
And he had amazing ability, yeah. So my grandfather tried to cultivate that, and my dad started playing, and then, of course, World War II came, and he kept playing all through the war. Mm-hmm. And by the time I came along, way later, I had that background. And my mother was a singer. And so I had kind of music in my background, but it was really learned at home. And just my exposure to recordings and listening. And those are really the two. I would say this about just jazz, and I will be talking to students about this. Two big things. If you really want to approach jazz as an improviser and you're interested in that part of it, then really you kind of can boil it down to two things. My friend, great baritone saxophonist, Gary Simoleon, who's a wonderful player in New York, he says it best. Basically, you just need two things. You need recordings and you need ears. Mm-hmm. And if you're willing to put time in, that's really what it is. That's the beauty of jazz. Most of the jazz history that we study and that's out there, the beauty of jazz compared to a lot of other types of music, classical and art music and stuff, has audio and video recordings of it. So you can literally watch and listen to the recorded bulk of jazz history, which is beautiful. That's one of the fortunate things about this music. So I started learning from my father, and then I went to a place called North Texas State University.
Yeah, just a little school down in Denton.
Right, down in Denton. And at that time, that was one of the few in the country that offered any kind of degrees in jazz, and that's what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really wanting to teach so much. I mean, I kind of fell backwards into teaching, but I wanted to play, and I wanted to be around the best players I could. And I came from a little small town in Illinois, so there wasn't much opportunity outside of, working with my father.
Yeah, a lot of jazz nepotism there for you, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There were a lot of great jazz programs, but I came from a real small town, mm-hmm. and we just didn't have a jazz band. We just weren't big enough high school that I think my whole high school was maybe 100 people or something,
sure.
75 people. It was just tiny. So I ended up going to North Texas. I checked out some things and went down there and got a great education as far as being around great players. I was exposed to a lot of terrific players. And I tell you what, most of the players that I went to school with are still in the music business, are some of the great names that you know in the music business.
Yeah.
And same thing. And then I went over to the University of Miami because I had friends from North Texas go there, and Miami was kind of starting to get a name at the time. And I went over there and did graduate work. And a lot of the great saxophone players, Rick Margitza and Andy Snitzer and Ed Kaye, Eddie Mena, they were all there. And so I got to be around those guys. Jim Snydero is a great long-term friend from North Texas. Tim Reese, who's a saxophone player with the Rolling Stones. So all of us are still out there playing.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I would encourage all the students. If you want to pursue it, try to go forward. There's so many opportunities, so many more than when I started as far as jazz education. And the important part is really just the networking.
Yes.
We have the Jazz Education Network Conference, which just came back from with the University of Illinois Concert Jazz, and we've been invited to play there 7 or 8 times through my years here at Illinois. And it's such a great opportunity for all the students just to network and meet people that you'll probably run into the rest of your musical lives.
You're right. Those connections you make early on, that networking is so core to it. And for me as well, I mean, that networking people I met when I was in college playing jazz 25 years ago, called me up down the road because they needed a trombone player to come do such and such gig, and so it does keep those windows open.
Of course.
And something I wanted to grab earlier too that you mentioned, the beauty of jazz is there are so many great recordings of these sessions. And for upcoming jazz students and even for my son, as far as learning improvisation is getting those tracks. We're in a digital world, right? Everything's pretty accessible, right. And being able to throw on some headphones and play along with Maynard,
oh yeah,
and be able to noodle in on those tracks, that just continues to build that improvisational technique.
Yeah, the learning curve is so much less. Now it takes so much less time than it did back in my day. We used to transcribe solos from records and literally drop the needle, wear records out because there were no technologies to help us. Today, you can transcribe anything off of a recording, slow it down, speed it up, take your time with it. And I have my students here at the University of Illinois do that all the time.
Yep.
And I highly recommend that. That's how the level has gotten so high at such an earlier age. And it's a wonderful thing to see. The students are just terrific, and they're bringing all this it just opens up all this creativity for them at a younger point in their career, and they can explore it longer, and that's really great. And that's one of the things that, back to your first question, got me around all these great jazz artists, because I was exposed to a lot of other wonderful players that were young like me, and we were all hungry and looking for, avenues to pursue the careers in music and in jazz.
Yep.
And I wanted to perform and play. That was really my thing. And I wanted to write. I got into writing music when I was in high school, I'd say, on my own as well. I started actually as a pianist. My dad insisted I play piano, which I'm thankful he did.
Yes.
And I still play piano to this day. And so that got me into the writing thing as well. And, so one of the things I would say is when I got out with the Woody Herman Band, the Maynard Ferguson Band, Arturo, Doc Severinsen, all these different people I played with through the years, it wasn't only just my playing that kept me able to do well on those gigs. It was certainly that got me in the door, but then the writing. Once they found out I could write, then I became music director for all those different people.
Yep.
And that makes a huge difference. So having a little versatility is a really big thing. And the college and the networking thing in jazz education these days, that's the pathway to get you there.
Yeah, having those things in your toolkit, and like you said, having those piano lessons early on, man, that is so critical for the writing side of it. If there's anything that frustrates me more, it's that I didn't. And as a a trombone player trying to write something, it's just
right. The piano provides a picture. It's a picture of harmony that we don't get with single note instruments like me either, with a saxophone or with a trombone, trumpet. You need something, a picture in your mind.
Yeah, and you may have that picture. You just need a way to express all of those pieces of it. Yeah, and that's where that comes in.
Right, and it doesn't mean you have to have, lots of chops. I studied classical and did some of that, so I still play, and I still play piano trios and do things in jazz. But that doesn't matter. That's just up to you. I enjoy doing that as a different thing sometimes. But if you can just sit down and have that picture in your mind, that really makes a difference. And I highly encourage any students that I work with, to get some type of keyboard skill, just a little bit. It really makes a huge difference.
Like you mentioned earlier, you've played all over the world. You've had these great opportunities, and what advice would you give as you've built that repertoire and those contacts and so forth? And keep those touch points, I guess, with these musicians that you've befriended and cohorts you've worked with and everything else. What advice would you give for folks, just, upcoming students, college students that are coming into an era where they want to perform to the next level and they want to do that?
Right.
How's the best way to keep all that under your fingers?
Well, I'd say probably three things. First, be flexible. Keep your adaptability and your flexibility all through your career. That's what extends you into other areas and other musicians that you might not get to if you're not. Keep your mind open. Second, work hard at your craft and at your art. Be not only a crafts person, and that means, being a virtuoso in jazz, you really need to be, somewhat of a virtuoso on your instrument to be able to improvise.
Right.
So that's the craft part, but it's also, nurture the artistic soul that you have. Find your own thing, as well as being flexible, and maybe being able to do a variety of things for other people, you also have to nurture your own creativity because you can get stale if you don't do that. And then the third thing, and probably the most important, just be nice. Be nice to people. Don't have the, attitude or anything like that. That just doesn't have a place in this. There's too many other great players out there and great musicians that are the same age as some of these college kids. And coming out of high school, I hear high school kids all the time, junior high school kids, and they're just playing amazing. Some of them are writing amazingly. And like I said, the learning curve is so quick these days that they're into it pretty fast. So you need to, stay flexible and adaptable, work hard at your craft and your artistic vision, and be nice. Those are the three big things I would say.
And don't poo-poo the free gigs. That exposure is actually worth it.
That's right. No. I take all kinds of gigs. I take a lot of gigs around here these days that are just to keep out and keep playing.
That's it.
And put me in contact with some people that maybe I don't get to see as much. Because I'm teaching a lot these days. But,
I gotcha.
Back in the day when I was, coming out of college and getting these road gigs, I tried to follow those three steps I mentioned. But I also took a lot of gigs when I would be off the road, when I was living in New York and I was out with Maynard Ferguson, per se. We'd usually have 2 or 3 weeks at Christmas. We'd be off, and then maybe in the summertime, a couple of weeks. And the rest of the time we were out. Woody Herman, same thing. Yep. So when I was home, I was cultivating, whatever was out there. The pay was, you got to make some money, and I understand that. But that wasn't really the important part to me. The important part was being able to get out and play a variety of music with some other people and keep my name out there, and keep in front of people. That's also important. That's a big one.
You got to stay front of mind. And it's like if you were going to be a chef, too, you've got to try different foods that you may not be the kind that you create. And next thing you know, you might find a new favorite as far as styles go.
Exactly.
I've, played everything from polka to bossa and everything in between, right? So step up, find a new favorite.
Yeah. Keep your mind open, like I said, too. The type of music, that almost, at this point in my career, that doesn't matter really at all to me. I like all kinds of music. I'm kind of, Duke Ellington had a great phrase he used to say, and I'm sure Clark knew this one too. This was a classic one. There's really just two types of music, good music and bad music. And it's either done well or it's not.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the genre is, what the style is. It just has, like I said, a craft behind it, an artistic vision behind it, and it's performed and executed well, or it doesn't. And that's really, excuse me, in the end, that's kind of really it.
Yep.
So I strive for that. Whatever type of genre I find myself playing in, that's why I probably do more playing these days, especially locally here, with my students. I play with the students more often than I play with my peers, in terms of age-wise and musical experience, because the students always offer up things that maybe I would never think of, in certain situations.
Okay.
They're still learning material, and learning tunes and trying different genres and stuff. And there's, in the process of that, they play something or write something that I would never think of. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's really creative and that's really cool. And so I'm always keeping an ear to that. And that's what keeps me fresh as well. So I have something to offer the students back.
That's a great point because, some of us can kind of get to a point where you might rest on your laurels a little bit and not see what the innovations are. But these are your new engineers. These are your new talent. And like you said, they may interpret something in a completely new way that opens your eyes to something too. And I think that's part of the beauty of music and why we still love it and we continue to, foster it into the next generation.
Oh, yeah. I found that to be true, as I was, or when I was a younger student, or I'm still a student of the music always, but when I was a younger man and I was getting started with my career, working for people like Woody Herman, people like Maynard Ferguson, Arturo, Doc, who were, considerably older than me, Matt Adderley, Cannonball's brother, worked with Matt quite a bit. And all of them, appreciated that I had little fresh ways of material that they'd been playing for a long time. Just fresh ways of approaching it. And they really appreciated that, and I think getting back to the Hot House recording, that's why Arturo really liked the charts I did, because I had a little different perspective on some of those tunes, which were considered basically old standards, a lot of them. And, it came to pass that people really liked a little different take on it, and it worked out great. I think that was maybe his first or second Grammy that he won he's won quite a few, but
Yeah.
that was the first one, I think.
Well, and that stretches, really, that whole concept stretches outside of jazz. And for those who may be in tune that aren't familiar with a lot of jazz standards, listen to pop music currently and listen to the samples that are inside other songs. I mean, it's been going on for 40 years of saluting the samples.
Oh, yeah.
Here's a Michael McDonald song that we've taken and we've ripped this part out and spun it up, and now it's a rap song, but it's got a totally different vibe. But that's, it's that hybridization of the styles is something that's cool, and it helps to continue to innovate.
Oh, yeah. There are groups like B Sharp and all these different groups that take samples of recordings from the 60s, Blue Note samples, and they mix them and do, DJ stuff and turntablists. That's been going on for a long time, too. And they'll mix it in with live playing, and they have all kinds of great creative stuff that's going on. There's less and less borders between music, and that's another beauty of jazz. Jazz has always been, to me, a very large umbrella of what I would call, that it covers the music types and genres. It's really inclusive, and I love that about it. There's, people have different definitions of it, and that's fine, but it's a large, large umbrella, and it covers a lot of different things. I think for me, the one thing that kind of keeps it jazz and music, that it has an improvisational element. That's the biggest difference, I would say, in jazz.
Yes.
A steady improvisational element throughout. That's kind of the basis of it. And then, again, it has elements of melody, harmony, and rhythm, with rhythm probably being the most active of the three, just because we're rhythmic beings. We have a heartbeat and brainwaves. So
yes, our ancestors banged on skins, and there's reasons for that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Jazz is born out of what we would call folk music, and dance and movement. Probably more so than the art music spectrum, which is more harmonic and maybe a little more melodic. I would say at a very base level, that's really what jazz is. And as far as this country and our definition of jazz, or what we can, inventing the word, I suppose, what we really contributed is the blues, which is a form that was nowhere else in the world. That's our one indigenous part of jazz that we contributed to it, and the rhythmic blending of all the melting pots of cultures in this country. Starting in New Orleans with just it being a seaport, and Chicago as well, and New York, and bringing in all these different influences. And jazz still does that.
Yes.
Still does that. When I travel and go out of the country and play, I hear that all the time, and I see it growing. I just was consulting with an ex-student of mine, a great saxophone player named Phil Doyle, and they're starting a program. He lives in Reykjavik, Iceland, and he teaches at the primary music school there, and they're starting a thing called Project X, which is a very inclusive multimedia arts program for music. It's jazz, but it's lots of other things, too.
Nice.
And, we were doing a lot of consulting on this last semester, and a whole team of people from a variety of universities in this country and in other countries, too. And it's going to be a really interesting program. And that's the future of music. It's just, like I said, it's constantly adapting, and you have to be adaptable and flexible.
Next weekend on Saturday, of course, the Jazz Festival happens during the day at the River Campus. I know there's a great group of high school kids that are going to be in there ready to just absorb everything you got to tell them. And then that evening, you'll be performing at Scout Hall in downtown Cape. It's at 420 Broadway. Tickets are on sale right now at thescouthall.com, and I know they've been going fast. I talked to them yesterday, and I don't know if there's a ton left. So go grab your tickets now, thescouthall.com. The doors for the evening concert are at 7. The show starts at 7:30. There's discounts, of course, for students and so forth, but thescouthall.com to grab the tickets for that evening thing. Your latest release is The Whirl, not World, WHIRL. The Whirl,
right.
And the notes I got is this kind of highlights your writing talent, your compositional talent.
Right. I think everything on there was an original of mine. Maybe I think all of them were actually on that one. It's just a small group record. I have a couple of ex-students on there. Sean Purcell is a great guitar player. Now he teaches at George Mason University in Washington, D.C., but a fabulous guitarist. And Stockton Helming, who's a great drummer friend of mine. We actually toured on with Doc Severinsen's big band together.
Nice.
And Stockton is the drummer on there, and he's a wonderful producer. And we had a lot of fun making that record. David Braid, wonderful Canadian pianist, is on there. I think he contributed one tune to that. And it's really fun. I just really enjoyed all the compositions. Like I said, I contributed most, but I think David contributed one, and maybe Sean contributed one as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it was all original music, and we had a blast making it. And I'm proud of that artistically. That's something that holds up. I feel like with my recordings that have come under my name, there's that one. There's Radio Approved. There's 4 Steps 3, which was on Capri. I feel like all of them have stood the test of time, and because they're strong artistic statements, and to me that's the mark of a good recording, period. That it doesn't sound like the music is dated. It sounds just as fresh as the day I wrote it and the day we played it.
Mm-hmm.
When I hear other great jazz artists, and I'm not comparing myself to these people, but just the records and recordings that I like, the John Coltrane recordings, the Miles Davis recordings, they sound fresh. They sound fresh. They sound like they're just as vibrant as they were the second they played them. Wade Shorter, some of my saxophone player heroes, Bill Evans, Chick Corea. You mentioned Chick before. All the recordings are just fantastic, and they hold up. They have quality because they were quality to start with, in terms of their artistic vision and in terms of the craft involved to make them happen. And so I'm looking forward to sharing that with the people at Scout Hall and at the university and all the students and all the people that come to listen. I'm glad to hear that the tickets are about sold out. Please come and check it out. I would love to hear you there and see you there and have you listen to the music, and happy to talk with people after the concerts and share whatever I can.
You mentioned earlier about playing with, you've played with some of your students there, doing a lot of gigging kind of around campus and so forth as they're coming up through college. I know Felipe does that as well here, and several of the faculty, they'll do a show at Scout Hall. And you I'm not sure who's on the lineup for you as far as the band that'll be playing with you when you're here in Cape, but my assumption is that maybe some of those are on that board as well as far as jumping in and performing. Yeah,
I believe Felipe has said that, it is going to be some students, and that's great.
Yeah.
I was really happy to hear that, so I think that's an invaluable experience. So
it is. What I've run into with a lot of musicians I've played with that maybe this is their first time to do something like that is that whole stage fright, and especially jazz guys. Some of us like to be a little more mathy and hang in the closet and not be on the front of the stage, and so
right.
This is a good chance to kind of get their feet wet, play with somebody that might intimidate them a little bit, but also do it in a comfortable environment. And so I salute you for doing that with your students and kind of giving them that, that feet wet experience to get that set off for them. And again, a lot of university professors, that's what we try to do is, to sink in with the students and get them there before they land on a stage and go, holy cow, how did I end up here?
Exactly. That experience is, again, invaluable to them,
mm-hmm.
and having a little bit of that with their professors. We pride ourselves here at the University of Illinois. We all do that, and I've been doing that for years. I started a program at Virginia Tech University years ago and Florida International, and I always did that with all my students, and still to this day. And, that's one of the things. I was really lucky coming up. I had a lot of kind mentors in terms of older musicians that were willing to let me, make mistakes and do things, but they were always not critical, but just reminding me of, okay, that, maybe you need to work on this. Maybe you should check this out. It was more like that. It was definitely a mentorship, and I think music is all about mentorship, in the end.
100%.
So, yeah, I really appreciate that, and I love doing that, and that's, like I said, one of the most interesting things that keeps it fresh for me, because I understand what they're going through, and I can understand what they're feeling on stage, and we can get past that, with a little bit of, like you say, on-stage mentorship and just making them feel like they belong.
He will be joining us on Saturday, February 15th at Scout Hall in Cape. Again, get those tickets at thescouthall.com, and then that's part of the Underground Jazz Series. And then, of course, you can catch him at the SEMO Clark Terry Phi Mu Alpha Jazz Festival earlier in the day at SEMO's River Campus. He is an educator and a performer, and we're looking forward to catching him next weekend. Grammy-winning saxophonist Chip McNeill, thanks for being my guest today.
Oh, Well, thank you, Darren. It was a real pleasure, and thanks to everybody, as I said, at SEMO and at River Radio there. It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to it, and I hope to see all of you at the concert.
Thanks for catching this Humans in Tune conversation with 93.9 Mike FM. Find previous interviews on our Facebook page, or you can listen via our podcast at 939mikefm.com.